Hello and welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Framework Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Hopkins, and today I'm going to be joined by somebody that some of you have seen before, our producer, Brodrick, and also Dr. Jen Welter. So really excited to have both of you on the show here today. It's always fun when Brodrick brings on guests and, actually gets to put that personality to work instead of just being behind the camera all the time. So Dr. Jen, really excited for you to be on the show here today. And how do you like to be referred to? Full name, doctor, whatever it is that you like to go by as we move through this.
Jen is fine. Some people say Coach Jen. Other people say Dr. Jen. I just say not Dr. Welter. That's my dad or my sister, so can get confusing in my house. And kind of one of my favorites coined by Sean Witherspoon when I was with the Cardinals was Dr. J, because clearly, at 5'2", I follow right in the original Dr. J's footsteps.
You got that sky hook down too? Yeah.
No. Certainly no. That sport I would say I hide it out of at 10 maybe.
Yeah, that's all right. This is not an incredibly tall podcast here, with me being the tallest at 5'10" here, so it's that's okay.
I might be able to win on the 6-foot hoop then.
There we go. I like that.
I believe
Brodrick does specialize as an outside shooter, so the 6 foot doesn't help him at all. He's the same shot,
I just live outside and hope someone 7 foot doesn't come out to the perimeter to block me, because that's what's going to happen.
I just play defense. That's it. I will bother people, but I'm certainly going to pass it if the shots are coming.
Now, I've noticed football players play pickup basketball everyone that's like, if you played baseball, you played football. When you play basketball, you bring that primary sport in. My dad's a football player, especially playing cornerback. Doesn't matter the rule change. He's going to hand check. He's going to play physical D the whole time. Are you in that same category? I mean, being for a linebacker coach, are you right up in someone's grill, no easy buckets the whole time?
I mean, if I'm going to play basketball, that's all I've got. But basketball is not a go-to sport for me. It's not one I grew up playing, and it's not one that I'm going to jump out and go play pickup for. So I leave that sport to friends of mine who are much better at it than I am. I tend to be far too competitive to just jump into things that aren't my thing.
Yeah. So I do want to get to that. Do you have a favorite pickup sport now that you play? Do you still play football now, or is that too much?
I feel like we're really going off the rails because it's COVID, and the only thing we can pick up now is COVID. So, this picking up,
you don't win. You don't win.
Really what I'm looking for. I think the terminology is bad. I feel like I've been isolated in my house for several months there, so it's a little bit of a sore shot saying pick up anything but that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So have you replaced that with anything during lockdown? Did you pick up like checkers and get really good at checkers?
No, I again, checkers requires somebody to play it with. So, that's not really, I don't think checkers is something I've played probably since I was a little kid. Doesn't hold a lot of interest, to me.
No, I know a lot of people, picked up like video games again. And like one of my friends was saying he, like with his kids, he's gotten back into Mario Kart racing. And, that's, we don't really play many video games here either, but that's an option. One thing we typically ask people, so this you still get to do during lockdown or, staying in your house, is eat. It's not as fun as going to restaurants, but we always love to ask people about food and what comes to mind for you, like favorite food, your favorite dish, cuisine. What first comes to mind for you?
Funny enough, I am not a big cooking person. I think that goes back to Thanksgiving, where it was a choice that you were either cooking the meals or you were watching football, and I was watching football. However, I will say during the pandemic, I have adopted kind of the HelloFresh. So it's a cool way to try some different things with, pre-portioned meals and directions. I thankfully did a speech for a friend of mine took over the marketing of HelloFresh Canada, and she said, if you'll do it, we'll hook you up. And so I didn't realize the pressure that would be with the food showing up like every week, but it's been fun. And my friends are making fun of me quite a bit because they're like, oh, what are you cooking today? And I'm like, it's not my normal like eggs and protein shakes. So HelloFresh has been good. I tend to love to make like protein pancakes. I'm a creature of habit. And I think that's something really important when you're disciplined in your fitness routine, is that you really are really pretty regular on the things that you eat and how you approach food. It's not like I live to eat. I mean, I like to go out like the rest of people because then it's a social occasion. But with that not being the dynamic currently, I think it's much more a routine function.
Yeah, when you were like training kind of professionally, did you ever do anything like, I mean, really strict with food down to like, so I did, right, where there's a point where like I didn't eat any sweets, I didn't drink any soda, no fried food, like I really only drank 3 different things. I had an incredibly limited diet for like 4 years, where I mean that was it. And I didn't realize up until doing that how much of an impact like food had on my output, right? Like until you actually like kind of condition yourself, I would just eat whatever. I mean, I would literally eat like cheeseburgers before races because I didn't think about it. And then as I started getting older, I was like, I probably have to pay attention to this. I mean, was there something that was like, did you mentioned high protein base, but like, did you go real extreme at any point?
I mean, I've always been really pretty balanced. I grew up in a healthy house, so um, my relationship with food, I'd say, has been pretty consistent throughout my life. But one of my really good friends, Allie, was a fitness competitor, and we ran a gym together for a long time. And she helped me refine how I thought about food. And I think the biggest difference was when you eat what. I was always relatively clean in terms of what I ate, but in terms of structuring meals to best fuel you throughout the day, and how you have different foods with respect to when you're training. The other thing that I found out, gosh, years ago now, before it was a thing, is that I'm actually allergic to gluten. And so I think back to how many pre competition meals that were subs, pizza, pasta, that were actually the worst thing in the world for me to be eating, because it wasn't like I was violently allergic or celiac or any of that. But it would give me the ultimate case of the itis. And so I never understood why I would get so tired. And also my joints would get really swollen. So my mom told me even as a kid, I would self-select away from some of those foods. Like I would eat, if she made pasta, I'd eat like the sauce and the meat and like maybe a little bit of the pasta. So I guess I kind of knew intuitively that some of that was bad. I think bread is way harder than some of those things. And I will never forget when the doctor told me, because I was used to being relatively bulletproof. I'd never really been allergic to anything, or as far as I knew. And he told me, and I was like, wait, what's gluten? I mean, this is how long it was ago. And, the doctor said, well, it's wheat. And I was like, wait, that's in everything. That's like death. And I tried to fight it for a while, but I can feel a difference. And I think, in a way that helps me to eat relatively clean regardless, because so many of those food options, that's right in there, and I know the consequences. So whereas people credit me with being pretty strict in what I eat, it's actually really like not always a choice. It's functional food as well.
Yeah. And I also want to say, as someone who's gone gluten-free, dairy-free, and now alcohol-free for almost a year now. Didn't know
Yeah.
myself. I had someone else say, it looks like you got some problems with your esophagus. You might want to go get this checked out. And yeah, when someone told me that, it was like basically telling, at the time, you're like someone whose whole family's from South Texas, now lives in the Midwest with meat and potatoes and all sorts of carbs and gluten. And I'm like, wait a second. I mean, people out here who put cheese on Jello, you're telling me I can't have any of this? And they're like, yeah. And it was like almost like rechanging your life. But as you said, you build this discipline. You learn to live a different way, and I don't know. You're not only do you feel better, but happier too. And then something I've liked, especially by not drinking, you're like, oh, in these social situations, no matter what, you 100% own your mind. You own, like, you're not, there's a lot more of just that self control, self discipline that comes out of it. That you know, usually, as you talked about a lot of things when you were growing up, it's not just there. You have to have some sort of practice that you have even from childhood. Usually parents come in, someone helps with that discipline as a role model that you've seen, to kind of help instill that. And so, yeah, I think that's cool that you've been able to do that, because as knowing myself, it was tough.
Yeah, I haven't gone as extreme as you are. I'm not crossing out alcohol 100% just yet. But there are many things that I just don't have in my eating practice. I mean, I haven't eaten beef since I was 10
Oh,
years old. Um, because my grandparents were cattle farmers, and I found out why I had a different pet cow each week. And so um,
oh.
when people talk about food and like their, real like relationship to it, a lot of it is very functional for me. Um, and so I think the just mentality about it is a lot different, um, by nature, or by that I've been taught, I guess, through all these years.
Yeah. I love the family ties to things, and you brought up the kind of Thanksgiving memory, which I think is really cool, that you're like, there's this cultural food thing going on, and I'm taking part of the other American culture, which is watching football instead. And one question I love to ask people in the show too is their first money memory, which is maybe something you've talked about or thought about before or not. But do you have one that you think back about money and say that was my first true money memory?
I mean, there's probably a lot of them because I was very conscious as a kid about money. I was on the math team, so I competed nationally in academic games from a very young age. So I was very conscious of different things, and I could count money, and I wanted it. And I think it was more like change, though. I liked the feeling of that, and I remember I think it was between ages 10 and 12. And I was a tournament tennis player at the time. And I told my dad that I needed to get a job. And he said, okay, Jenny, why do you need to get a job? And I said, because I need money so I can buy a wave runner. And he said, okay, well, why do you want to buy a wave runner? Well, where I lived was really far from all of my friends. I was on the beach side, and most of my friends were over on the river side. So I never got to see them. But I knew that the fastest way across the river was not the long way on a golf cart that most people would think of, but it was straight across. And so the way I could do that is if I would get a job and buy a wave runner. And my dad said, well, I think you're pretty good at tennis. So how about we let part of that be your job? And I was like, wait, what is this? You're going to pay me to do something I like? Like, this is fascinating. And so what he did was actually attach like a monetary reward system to practicing tennis and to, going out and playing tournaments. And, it wasn't like it was a ton of money, but that way I didn't have to make the decision that either I played tennis or I got a job. He said he was just so impressed by the fact that I didn't just say, hey, you need to buy me this so I could go see my friends. Like, I had this whole game plan and this thought process on how I could do this. So I remember it was like, if I went to play in a tournament, I maybe got $5 and I didn't get the cash. It just went towards this wave runner so that you could work and see it pay off. And, if I won the tournament, it was like $50 or something. And I wanted to win. So needless to say, I got the wave runner and still played tennis and did not have to get a job at that time. But I thought it was a pretty brilliant play on my dad's part to, teach me the worth of money and the work that goes into, really being able to work hard and earn the things that you want in life.
That's awesome. And when you tell that story, I'm gonna guess that you're from Florida then. That sounds like, so a lot of my family is from like Sebastian Inlet and like up through Satellite Beach. That's where most of my family lives, which is, yeah.
I went to Sebastian River High School, actually.
Yep.
And so I was in Vero, but drove to Sebastian River High School. I was in the first graduating class there. So yes, you are spot on. Because we were on a barrier island. And that's why I couldn't see my friends and needed a wave runner to be able to get there.
Yeah, what I think about, because like that's some of my cousins would, same problem, right? Going over the handful of bridges and then, going all the way around and then back to the middle straight across. It takes a little bit of time. So it's, I do love it down there. And, I don't get down there as much as I did, but that was I think my last trip before like COVID and everything shut down. I was actually up in Satellite Beach and Majorca area for about a week. And, my grandparents are still alive. They're in their late 90s and still live over there, like a block from the beach. So that's, most of my childhood, like summer memories are down there.
Yep. So you can relate to the wave runner.
I can. And I also love the quote, right? Was that from Eastbound and Down or one of those, right? I've never seen an unhappy person on a jet ski, right? So, yeah.
Except when you go into some of those back channels and you actually see like an alligator. All of a sudden, even the most stable wave runner starts to feel like, you're seated. It's not like the jet ski where you're standing, but all of a sudden, I just remember it being like, whoa! Like, it was like me and one of my best friends were like, is that a alligator? Like,
oh,
maybe
man.
one.
All of these things I can't relate to growing up in Nebraska. Especially that last.
A little different. You might be unhappy on a wave runner in Nebraska because there's probably not that good of places to go. Maybe.
No, just the cornfields. That's I guess you don't want to get lost in them. That's your greatest fear, I guess, as a Nebraskan. But well, what I would love to know, going back to how you grew up and watching football on Thanksgiving Day. Why was football the sport you gravitated toward? I remember talking to Nancy Lieberman a while ago, again, mutual friend of ours, about, well, why basketball? Something she loved. As simple as that. And it's always interesting to me because, I grew up watching, Dwayne Wade, Tim Duncan, and people that I could see. And I was like, okay, that's someone I want to be like. But in your case, when you don't have someone who looks necessarily like you and you're saying, I want to do this, but you don't have that necessary identical role model in that place, I guess, what was that like to still pursue that and be like, I don't care if someone there looks like me, this is what I want, I'm going to do it anyway?
Well, unlike Nancy, where she had a chance to play on the courts as a female and just play with the guys, I fell in love with football, and it was because all of Vero Beach shuts down on a Friday night and goes to play, right? Jamie can tell you, it's a way of life down there. Like, everyone goes to the high school football games. It's not, Vero is 3 hours away from most of the major colleges and from all the pro teams as well. So you like football, but you're not just shutting down to go watch college or to go watch the pros, which are so far away. It's about high school, and everyone goes. And I remember watching those games and thinking that the football players looked like superheroes in their pads and their helmets, and it just looked like the coolest game. And I was like, well, I want to do that. And it was the first place in the world that somebody told me, no, girls don't do that. And my dad didn't raise me that way. My mom didn't raise me that way. You know, my dad is a Vietnam veteran, with a Silver Star and 2 Bronze Stars. Like, you know, we went fishing and it wasn't like there's a pink pole and a blue pole. Like, you know, you get the little fish. No, it was like, you want the biggest one up and you better catch it because no one else is going to catch it for you. So we had that mentality of there really wasn't anything you couldn't do. And then all of a sudden it was like this place that this whole town was obsessed with was full stop when it came to females. Like, oh, you could be a cheerleader. And I used to laugh. Like, I have a lot of respect for cheerleaders, but everybody would try and get me to do that. And I'm like, oh, I'd be really bad. And they're like, well, what do you mean? You're such a good athlete. And I'm like, because my back would be to the game. I would completely drop you. Like, it wasn't like there's something wrong with you doing this, but it was wrong for me because I knew that I couldn't put my back to the game. You know, because I was really strong. They always thought I'd be a base, and all I could picture was like, yeah, oh, I'm sorry, right? Like, it never equated to me that, you know, the guys should be watching and the girls should either be cooking or have their backs to the field. And so it was like this kind of does not compute type of mentality. And I mean, I really didn't get to play football until the powder puff game in high school, which of course I scored the only touchdown, and was the captain, and then also was on the homecoming court, like this weird confluence of events. But then when I went to college, you know, it still wasn't an option. There wasn't a place for girls to play. But when I went to Boston College, I saw rugby for the first time. And I had never seen rugby played before. But I was like, wait, this is the coolest thing in the world. It took 2 of my passions, which were football, this sport I wasn't allowed to play, and soccer. And it was like this weird, you know, kind of hybrid of the 2. And the second I saw it, I was all in. And so ended up playing all 4 years for Boston College, and then started playing first flag and then tackle directly after college. So it was kind of like this unrequited love for a very long time. And the second, you know, as I got closer and closer to it, you know, through rugby and then, you know, through flag. And so I had both components there. It was just kind of like it was set up to win. And I'm still thankful, by the way, I'm going to throw this out there, that I learned how to tackle in rugby, because I still credit a lot of my success in football and the techniques I use to this day when coaching others to my rugby roots. Though back then it wasn't sexy, right? Like, they were like, well, why do you tackle like that? We don't tackle like that. And I'm like, but I don't miss. And, you know, thankfully years later, people have come around to my way of thinking.
That's awesome. Yeah, I played 1 semester of rugby at the end of college, and you know, I did not have good training on tackling because I had played football at a very young age for a while, and then really not again until, you know, rugby. And we had a match, and I don't even remember who it was against. I'm thinking it might have been UNC, but on a tackle, I mean, I got absolutely rocked, and like I know that I kept playing, and it's one of those ones where you get that concussion, and at the time that wasn't even a thing, and like nobody pulls me out or anything. But I just remember being in the shower later and standing there, and I didn't remember how long I'd been in the shower, right? Like, and I was like, I don't know if I've been in here like 5 minutes or like an hour. And I had no idea. And I just remember standing there just kind of being like, yeah, I don't know how long I've been in here at all. And that's the last one I played. So,
well, and then there was swimming.
And then there was swimming.
Unfortunately, most people don't teach tackling well. And I love teaching tackling, whether it's, you know, boys or girls to this day. And I always make it a point to be the one that teaches them. Like this summer, I did a bunch of camps with Hard Count Athletics. So we did a few for Tyreek Hill. We did Justin Jefferson, and we did Josh Jacobs. And I actually worked with all 3 of those guys on tackling, though I will say Josh Jacobs already knew how to tackle. Tyreek Hill, they definitely had not made tackle before. And he was so funny because he came over and he was like, and I had never met him before, right? I'm just out there coaching. And he looked and he was like, oh, this defense, I don't do this, and left. And I was kind of like, right. But then he came back over and he was like, coach, this looks really fun. And I was like, because it is. And he was like, and he starts bouncing. Like, if you haven't been around Tyreek Hill, like, he bounces just like he's on the field, like that energy and speed that he has. He's like, coach, I want to do it. And I was like, so do it, right? Assuming someone had taught him. And he goes and makes a tackle. And of course I go like right into coach. Like, I'm like, okay, so we're going to have to fix this. Right. And he was like, and I was like, okay, so I'm going to need you to like pick me up. And he was like, what? And so I made him do essentially like hips, like lift from the hips, like put their legs together, lift up so that you could track the hips, keep your head up, chest open, all that stuff. And I did it in real time. And then made him do it again, like where I was like running and he had to run through and pick me up. And he was like, that was amazing. He was like, she fixed me like real time, because I know if I feel it, I can fix it. And I can make them fix it, because it should be really easy. I'm 130 pounds for a guy to be able to like pick me up and not have to bring me to ground. So you're getting that low to high hip thrust kind of WWE tackle that all the guys are like trying to get. I know when I feel it, I can feel where they're not engaging the right way, so I can make sure they're doing it right. And he was like, that was so dope. And he goes to my friend Jameson. He was like, she's really good. And she's like, yeah, I know. And he was like, no, like she fixed me like right there. And he's like, I felt it. And she was like, yeah, I know. And he goes, if that's a female coach, I want one. But part of the reason why I love to teach the guys is because your head should never come in contact with the body. And so I'll joke with them all the time. I'm like, look, I can tackle you and never mess up my makeup. And literally will show them so they can see it and they'll remember kind of those things. And I know if I can give them that foundation, they won't have that experience that you did. And that even if they do, it'll be because somebody juked and they were in the right position, as opposed to it being a wrongly taught tackle. And tackling is an art. It shouldn't hurt me or you. But unfortunately, with a lot of egos in the equation, many kids never get taught the right way to tackle.
Well, there's a lot we could dissect out of that, but before you keep going on, I have to say, as a diehard Broncos fan, it hurts me to know you made Tyreek Hill better than he already was. We already didn't stand a chance, and now he can play defense, so thank you.
Well, look, it'll only come into play if he has to track somebody down and make a tackle. But an interesting stat, so I did an interview with him prior to the beginning of it, and I was like, Tyreek, your stats have gone from this to this and from this to this. And I was like, but there's one stat that you were best at your rookie year. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, you got to tell me about this. In your rookie year, you had 7 tackles and you haven't had that since then. But he played special teams in his rookie year. Of course, they're not going to risk him there now. But he was like, and then he was like, oh yeah, I played special teams. I was like, I know. I said, but I couldn't just praise you like everybody else does all the time. And he started laughing. So it shouldn't come into play unless Patrick Mahomes throws a pick. But with that Broncos defense, they are pretty darn tough on the defensive side of the ball this year.
We're looking okay.
And Pat Surtain Jr. is a good friend. So.
Oh man, he's phenomenal. First interception last Sunday. I officially dated this podcast, but
yeah, I mean, I had to throw his name in there. I've known his dad for a very long time, and I actually went and talked to his. That is the puppy getting herself in trouble. If you guys heard that, I have a 3.5-month-old puppy. I was talking to Pat Surtain Sr. earlier this year, like right before draft, and he said, Coach, you should be proud. And I was like, for what? And he goes, of that crew that you talked to, we have 7 kids that should get drafted. And he said, you went into that locker room and you talked to all of them. So I'm going to credit you with that. And I was like, Coach, Definitely not taking that credit, but I will say I'm going to take the cool points, and you, sir, get the credit for being with those kids every day. But great to see Pat Surtain out there, and the defense that they're assembling up there at Mile High.
Well, anytime, I mean, all of that is right. It's a community, it's a collection of events that occur throughout your life, right? So you did get to be part of that collection of events that help move somebody forward, which is pretty amazing.
Well, you hope anytime you talk to a group like that, that maybe just one thing, right, that we said or we did gave them strength in a position that they may not have had it, or they pull from something that you said, or, maybe those guys, for example, and there is a female in the scouting department who's really pretty high up with the Broncos organization. So maybe there's a part of them that before might have looked kind of side-eyed, but now they're conditioned to be even more receptive. So you never know on how they answered a question in that interview process or something. You hope that your engagement or experience had one little good nudge in a right way. You'll never know about it, likely, but hopefully, anytime that we give our time and our knowledge or spirit or heart to build into somebody else, it fortified them or strengthened them or pushed them at a time when they needed it.
So tell me a little bit more about like your development then into a coach. So obviously you walked us through college and playing rugby, and then you got to play, more football after that too here in the US, and then into coaching. But did you have some milestones through there that, you love to, kind of think back upon that were really impactful for you just in this trajectory and development?
Sure. The first one is that I never sought it. There were no women in coaching, especially not at the pro level. So I never looked and said, you know what, I want to do that, or I'm going to be her. And that's why representation is so important. It gives us permission to look at the world differently and to maybe see ourselves in those situations. So I will be very honest and humble in saying that it was not something I set out to do. But what I did know at an early age is that I had a talent for playing the game, and I was good at working with others. So I had done that in, teaching aerobics since I was 18. I first got certified there, probably going back to that tennis experience where I felt like I was cheating the system, getting paid to work out. So that was my part-time job all the way through going to the Arizona Cardinals, honestly, whether it was teaching aerobics or training, because it allowed me to do the things that I needed to do physically, and also have the flexibility of schedule to be able to go and compete. But I also realized, though I was really good at training, the reason why I was good is because it wasn't just physical. A lot of it was mental. A lot of what it took to get somebody from where they were to the next level was to figure out what was holding them back. I remember one of my clients, Chris, she worked so hard and I couldn't understand why we weren't getting there until one day it came out that her husband, who was a military man and was very strict on things, he controlled all the food in the house and she would eat to get revenge. So she was undoing all the work that she was doing to get back at him. And it was really hurting her and frustrating her in the process. But that wasn't just physical, it was mental. And it was kind of that and a few other things that made me realize why I was successful as a trainer was actually because of the relationships and the psychology. And so that's a lot of what motivated me to then look into sports psychology. So I got my master's in sports psychology and then my PhD in psychology. And what I figured was, because there was no trajectory for a girl in football to have a career, what I could do was take the practical experience being one of the best in the world and marry it with the theoretical knowledge and become a unique value proposition to the sport. So I did not get it thinking, oh, this is going to make me a better coach. I got it thinking this is a way I could contribute to my sport. And along the way, I got certified, or I got a certification in scouting and general management. Again, not because I wanted to be a scout or a general manager. Those things weren't possible, but I wanted to understand it for my clients who were going through the process, because how can I bring you through it? Whereas that was a blind spot for me because that wasn't a part of the process for women in football. So I wanted to the best of my ability, be able to, take somebody through as if I was playing in their cleats or walking in their shoes. And so I did these things while playing, put a lot of them in practice. It made me very aware of like coach athlete relationships, feedback mechanisms, team chemistry, motivating different individuals, all of those things. And I was actually, funny enough, coaching coaches on coach athlete relationships and feedback. But it had never crossed my mind that I could actually coach. And when I got into the world of men's professional football, first as a player, it was the relationships I developed with those players that caught the attention of our new head coach, Wendell Davis, who sat me down, grilled me on football, what was good with the team, what wasn't. And then he came to me the next day, actually called me on the phone and said, all my defensive coordinator and I could talk about yesterday was how you have to coach this football team. And I literally said, no. He's like, what do you mean no? And I said, no, girls don't coach football. I'm not doing that. And he said, not a lot of guys are going to give you this opportunity. You're taking this job. I said no and hung up on him. And the next day he called me back and told me about myself. He said, do you remember how I told you not a lot of guys were going to give you this opportunity? You were taking this job. I said, yeah. He said, good. I took it for you. You're coaching for me. And by the way, you can't quit. Otherwise, the entire narrative surrounding women coaching in men's pro football will be, we had a girl once and she quit. And I was like, what? I don't quit. Right. And that's all I could think of. So I wouldn't have stepped up to the challenge because I didn't necessarily see myself that way. But once I was put into that position, I also wouldn't quit because that was something that wasn't in my DNA. So I thank Wendell for seeing talent, even though the packaging was slightly different.
I mean, that's an amazing story. And I love how, again, right, a coach was able to see something in you and kind of pull the right string to make you act on it, right? Versus just being like, here's an opportunity, take it or leave it. And then you being like, wow, I don't want to.
Well, and what I love about it too, and I think is so important, is in a lot of situations where we're looking to say, make them more gender balanced, it's, you have a bunch of guys in the room and they say, well, maybe we should have a girl. Like, does anybody know one? Well, likely in football, you don't, because those worlds didn't intermingle. And the difference in this situation was he saw me as a football person first. And it didn't add up to him that I wouldn't do it because he wasn't looking to like change all of football by hiring a woman. He was just like, wait, these guys listen to you and you know your stuff. Like, why wouldn't you coach? And he wasn't ever thought to have that barrier, or he was never trained to see that as being limiting because he was a guy, where I was because I was a female. And thankfully, he was just strong-willed enough to make me do it.
And so I'm guessing that, that opportunity, you got to play there, you got to coach there, and then eventually you get an opportunity, which is another first, right? Which is with the Arizona Cardinals, which then, obviously opens up lots of doors for women, long term. But how did that one come about too? I mean, that's because obviously at the time there was no path for that, right? There wasn't a, hey, well, that's somebody that I want to be just like, and go walk down that opportunity.
Right. And now, thankfully the NFL has made an effort to change those dynamics. They have developed a pipeline for women in coaching that they actively seek out women to help them develop, which was not there when I was doing it. It actually was created in response to my time in Arizona. but what's interesting is like when there's progress in one area, sometimes it creates progress in other areas. And Sarah Thomas was hired as the first full-time NFL ref. And a reporter asked Bruce Arians, because Bruce is just a guy who will tell the truth, unlike some coaches who, you listen to and you know less than you did when you started, right? Like, you feel like, whoa, wait, I thought I knew something and now I really don't. Like Bill Belichick notoriously tells you less than nothing, but can answer questions for like 40 minutes. And you're like, how do I know less now, coach? Like, how is that possible? And he's brilliant in that capacity. But Bruce Arians will actually just, say things that often people are like, whoa, like that was a lot. And so a reporter asked him, and he said, the second a woman proves that she can make these guys better, she'll be hired. And so I eventually called the Cardinals on behalf of myself. As if I wasn't myself, I was not necessarily not the assistant coach that day, but I was definitely the assistant to the head coach that day. And I left a message for Bruce Arians on behalf of my head coach that my head coach wanted to talk to their head coach because he'd heard what he said about a woman coaching football. And, he'd like to talk to him. And that is exactly what happened. So he ended up calling my head coach back and said, tell me about this girl. He invited me out to OTAs, and on the sidelines of OTAs at, the Arizona Cardinals facility, I guess I impressed him because he eventually invited me to join them. So
I love that. And I love too how, going back into your story, having someone believe in you when you not necessarily, it's not that you didn't believe in yourself. It's just that representation bias that had been there so long. You're like, isn't something I could do. I think that's really interesting because you see that with a lot of opportunities. We have a lot of advisors who listen to this show, and there's a lot of people who say, well, I've never seen someone like me in there. And it sometimes takes someone else coming in that champion just for yourself, saying, no, you can, because I see what you don't see in you. You're looking at coaching everybody else, but you're not looking at you. And I think that's awesome. And to kind of tie to that, a question I've asked you before, and by the way, you've had probably the best answer to anyone I've ever known. That's when I asked this question. It was about a year ago. I'm going to see if it's changed at all. But I asked you once, and I'd love for this audience to hear what your thoughts are here. Looking at what you're doing and the impact you're making, not just with women in sports, but you're doing public speaking and you're sharing your story with people across industries and making this awesome impact for diversity and inclusion, across multiple industries and fields. But when you look at all that and you think 100 years from now, if you got to pick the word that people remembered you by, and someone says, man, Dr. Jen Welter or Dr. J was this one word, and you get to pick it, what word would you go with?
Gosh, I wish I remember what I said. I hope it was pretty good. I guess it was pretty good. But I often have the joke with people. I say I'm a disruptor. And I did a speech for a group of women in construction this past weekend, and I said that they could all borrow my title if they'd like to, but they may not want to put it on a business card. And of course they're all kind of looking, and I was like, well, I just call myself Disruptor in Chief. So you can look at what that acronym would be, and you may not be able to get away with putting that on a business card, but whether it's a disruptor or a catalyst or someone who instigates, right? Like instigates change in situations or allows people to see things differently, to kind of look at the status quo and see where you fit in. Those are the things that I think I'm proud of, and it takes a lot to commit to that, because it often requires being brave, even when, or especially when, you don't feel brave. And people kind of look at me, they're like, but people love you for what you've done. And I say, some do. And on the flip side, some don't. You have to get really, really comfortable with that, because when you're a disruptor, you're controversial by nature. That means some people love you, and those are the people who will be championed by you or inspired by you or will have opportunities because of you. But the other, there's also a very big group who will hate you, because those people are the status quo. And if they were comfortable in the hammock of life that is the status quo, and they're chilling, watching time go with a Mai Tai in their drink, and you are that disruptor, you're the one who flipped the hammock and spilled the Mai Tai. So why would they like you? And when I say that to people, they kind of go, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. And I was like, yeah, you didn't, because I've had to live my life that way. And to realize that when you do things differently, you're never, ever neutral, right? You're never a shade of gray. You're never, oh, well, I don't know how I feel about her. No, like, people have a strong opinion, and strong means that you are either their taste or you are not, right? We're not talking, meat and potatoes. We're talking, spicy curry or Szechuan, and it's either something you would order or something you would stay far away from. So I think that is what I take pride in, because I know it's the right path, because it's so damn hard, and it's hard every day. And I have to champion that, right? Like I say, a lot of people now, it's like a trendy phrase. They say, well, like, first and not last. And I go, yeah, but do you know what that means? Do you know, and have you really thought about what that entails? Because I say the opportunity and responsibility of being first is to ensure that you are not the last, because it means opening doors. It means creating legacy. It means being vocal and visible, and giving other people permission to show up. It means not just looking out for yourself and often putting yourself last as like a great fullback. And in my career, it's funny, being a linebacker, I've taken on a lot of fullbacks, and yet in my role as a leader, I am a fullback, right? It's often you're opening up the holes so that somebody else could run through. And that means opening up doors that will be closed specifically for you, because of who you are and what you entail. And so I remember when I was playing on the men's team, there were 75 to 100 women who had flown in from all over the world for another event. It was actually the first Women's World Games, and they were in Arlington, Texas, on the day that I was playing in Allen, Texas for the men's team. And one of my coaches had said, Welter, you got to come. You got to meet these women. Like, it's like weird. They like whisper your name, because here I was getting ready to play pro football against men. And so I went, and Arlington to Allen is, it's probably a good hour and a half, right? So I drove an hour and a half to go talk to those women. And I said, like, I would be out here with all of you if I wasn't doing this. And all of those women were then coming later to watch me play. And I said, it's not because of me, but I hope that this will open holes for all of you to run through, and that I can be a good fullback. And I committed to that day, to be that person who consistently was there to open the holes, even when it meant taking on some big blocks and some big opposition. And so I guess those are the things that I look at on a day-to-day basis. And I don't remember the answer I gave you before, but I'm pretty sure it's along those lines.
Yeah, it was. I remember asking, it was like a year ago, but again, same lines, except I asked, I was like, hey, what word do you want to be remembered by? And it was the same, again, along lines of disruptor. Started by saying, I don't know, what would you say? Like, put it on me. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. What would I say after this? And that's what's great about it. There's a lot that culminates in that one word and what you're trying to do. And it's also interesting because some would say disruptor, but if you're the person that spilled the Mai Tai, they might call you something else. And
Oh, I
so
think
it's
a lot of things, and not all are PG-13. So, depending on who you ask, and that's, I think that's what's really challenging. And it's challenging for a lot of people in the spotlight because depending on what your vantage point is, the words changed quite a bit. I know even when I was in Cardinals training camp, I made sure to not have the TV hooked up because I didn't need to be distracted by what everybody else was saying, because whether they were like, oh my gosh, she's the champion for all women in this changed sports, or they were like, she's the death of football, which both were there depending on which TV station you turned on, neither one could help me do the job. And so I could go from media coverage to standing on the table like, yes, to curled up under the table, sucking my thumb, like, please make the world go away. And none of that would help. And so I tell that to people all the time is like, be great and don't read the comments, because the comment section or the weeds or the social media chatter or the, internet ninjas, like, they could kill you or cure you depending on the day. And because you have no control over it, and because it's not about you, it's about them, you just have to put your head up and keep working. And that's it.
I thank you so much for sharing that. I've got, I guess, three things that I, listened and want to just kind of say. First of all, I don't know if anyone has told you today, but thank you for being a disruptor today, right? I mean, you don't probably get it every day, but I'll take the moment just to say thank you on that. The other one is I love that you just talked to a women's group of construction people. So, my mom has been, didn't graduate from college. My dad passed away when I was 8 doing construction, and my mom's run that company for like 30 plus years now. And absolutely, there are very few women in construction in period either, right? Like they don't exist a whole lot. So thanks for doing that. She probably wasn't there at this point, but she's like late 60s, still working, still running a construction company. And then I think, the other thing, that last one is, block out those comments. Like I used to write, I still write a lot, but when I first started writing and I'd like have articles on Yahoo or wherever it was being published, and I would actually, for probably like 6 months, I would respond to every comment. Not only read them, but like I had an account and I would write back to all of them. And eventually I realized that was really unhealthy. And so I don't look at any comment at all ever again anymore. Like I'm done with that. And if somebody sends me like a email, I don't even write back to the ones that are negative. I just delete them, and I might even go to the deleted folder and delete it again. So even if I change my mind, it's gone.
So I will tell you guys, funny, one thing that I learned though is how important humor is and being able to laugh at these things, right? So here I am on the men's team, and I mean, it's not kind to be the number one story in the country. Like the things that you read about yourself are not great, right? It was, and yet one of my clients found one comment, and she sent it to me, and she was like, I just couldn't resist. And the comment was, she's going to die and or get pregnant. And her comment to him was, and here's hoping you're sterile, right? And I remember I was alone at my house, and I just started laughing, right? Because it was so bad and so absurd that it was hilarious to me. And when I got put through like the media car wash, and everybody's looking for the juice and the this, like I was like, hey guys, I got one for you. I know it's probably shocking, but not everybody is thrilled about a woman playing in men's pro football. And so my favorite comment is this. There was like one guy said I was going to die, or get hit so hard I was going to die and or get pregnant. And I'm like, I gotta tell y'all, I was one of the best linebackers in the world for a really long time. And I mean, I hit people really hard, but I did not know it was possible to hit someone so hard that I could cause immaculate conception and death. Like, that's something, isn't it? And the laughter, right? Like exactly what you guys did. All the guys were like, well, I mean, I guess it can't get any worse than that, can it? And I'm like, well, I mean, if you can get worse than immaculate conception and death, let me know, because I'm all ears. Like, right? Like, this is something I need to know. And it diffused that desire to go like for the kill, or for the like, can we break her down kind of thing. And then it allowed us to just really talk about how things were going. And it fortified me for so many situations going forward, because if I was like, who can top immaculate conception and death? You don't really have a go-to that's better than that. So I'm already well prepared, right? Like when you've been threatened with that, just, I mean, there's not much else. So no matter what I do, I kind of look at what the outcome could be, and most of it is not worse than immaculate conception and death. So you take those things, take them with a grain of salt, and then hopefully use it as your fortification to face some pretty tough situations.
Well, Dr. Coach Disruptor Jen, this was amazing, and I want to be respectful of our time, so we'll close it out here today at the end of that one, which I always love to ask people at the end, just best ways to interact with you, follow you, whether it's website or social media, and so what's best for you?
Yeah, depending on what you're looking for, there's a few. Obviously, jenwelter.com is my website. And there are ways to like send messages for speaking engagements and those things. I am very active on LinkedIn if you're in a business professional community. And then on Instagram, it's Welter47. I am doing broadcasts on Twitch now, and that's Dr. Jen Welter. And it's JWelter47 on Twitter. So kind of the through thing, so people know it's like a welterweight is a welterweight in boxing. And 47 was my football number. So it's kind of the athlete code. We're really not that original. It's last name and number, just like you would have seen it on a jersey.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us and all of our listeners here today. Everything that you've done out there for women in the profession, and being that disruptor and trailblazer and opening doors for others. It's important. So thank you. And Brodrick, thanks for doing the invite and being on the show here today too. And everybody else out there, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Framework Podcast.